itu belum ada saya punya KTP. Tapi karena saya takut itu ada virus, saya suntik vaksin. Karena tanpa KTP tidak boleh mengakses segala-segalanya. Kalau ada KTP, mengakses vaksin gampang. Saya pekerja seks. Setiap hari saya melayani tamu-tamu datang ke sini. Tapi kalau udah kena COVID, berbahaya. Virus itu menjangkit. Makanya saya
ก็ตอนนั้นที่กลับบ้านก็คือพยายามหางานทุกอย่างนะครับแต่มันยุคโควิดครับใช่หางานยากใช่ครับกังวลครับแต่มันเรื่องไม่ได้เพราะทุกวันนี้คือเราต้องใช้เงินในชีวิตประจำวันอยู่แล้วใช่ตอนนั้นน่าจะประมาณ2 ปีที่แล้วใช่ครับแล้วก็เหมือนตอนนั้นผมกังวลเพราะตอนนั้นมีเขาว่าฉีดมาก็เหมือนมีคนตายใช่ครับถามว่ารู้สึกไงก็เฉยๆเหมือนโดนบังคับฉีดด้วยนะใช่อาจจะช่วยเพิ่มภูมิต้านทานเราใช่ครับไปไหนมาไหนมันก็เอาง่ายคือเหมือนถ้าเราเดินผ่านกันหรือว่าสัมผัสกับคนรอบข้างมันอาจจะไม่ติดง่ายใช่ครับ
ဟုတ်ကျွန်တော်တို့ဒီကိုစရောက်တဲ့အချိန်နဲ့ကိုပါအဲ့လောက်စိုးရတဲ့ပြဿနာမျိုးကဒါပထမဆုံးကြုံဘူးတာပေါ့နော်ကျွန်တော်တို့ကတော့ဒီမှာရွှေပြောင်းလုပ်ဒီမှာဆိုတော့ဒီနိုင်ငံမှာကျွန်တော်တို့တော့ကအလုပ်ရှိမှပတ်စံရှိမယ်ပေါ့ကျွန်တော်တို့ဒီမှာအလုပ်လုပ်နေမှမိသားစုကိုလည်းပြန်ပို့နိုင်မယ်ဒီများနိုင်ငံမှာနေဒီများနိုင်ငံစီကံကိုလိုက်နာအဲ့တော့မဖြစ်မနေထိုးရမယ်ဆိုတော့အဲ့ကာလာတော့ဆိုရင်ကျွန်တော်တို့ဈေးသွားဝယ်တော့မှအဲ့လိုလေစေးထိုးပြီးမှသွားဝယ်လို့ရတဲ့ဟာမျိုးတွေရှိတယ်စကင်ဖတ်ပြီးမှဝင်လို့ရတဲ့ဟာမျိုးတွေရှိရလေအဲ့တော့စိတ်ဓာတ်နဲ့ပဲအဲ့ဒီစိတ်နဲ့ပဲသွားထိုးလိုက်တာပါ
ខ្ញុំគិតថាវាសំខាន់ក្នុងផ្នែកដែរព្រោះដោយសារតែទី1យើងអាចលក្ខណៈរស់នៅដោយយើងអត់ខ្លាចនៅជំងឺ COVID ហ្នឹងដែលយើងទទួលបានវ៉ាក់សាំងហើយព្រោះបើសិនជាយើងអត់ទទួលបានវ៉ាក់សាំងទេទី1គឺយើងខ្លាចជំងឺរបស់យើងមួយហើយទី2យើងខ្លាចនឹងជំងឺដែល COVID ហ្នឹងទៀតចឹងណាបាទសម្រាប់ខ្ញុំចង់ផ្ញើជាសារមួយសម្រាប់ទៅរដ្ឋាភិបាលឬក៏អ្នកដែលផលិតនៅវ៉ាក់សាំងហ្នឹងគឺថាផលិតឬអាប់ដេតវ៉ាក់សាំងណាដែលfit ជាមួយនឹងអ្នកដែលមានផ្ទុកមេរោគអេដឬក៏អ្នកដែលមានជំងឺខ្លាមឬក៏អ្នកដែលមានជំងឺបេះដូងជាដើមអញ្ចឹងពីព្រោះអីគឺគាត់ក៏ចង់រស់រៀនមានជីវិតដូចនឹងគេដែរហើយអញ្ចឹងកុំឲ្យគាត់ដូចលក្ខណៈដូចខ្ញុំប្រាប់ពីមុនជិតគាត់រស់នៅដល់ការភាពភ័យខ្លាចនៅជំងឺ COVID-19 ហ្នឹងអញ្ចឹងគឺឲ្យគាត់រស់នៅភាពជឿជាក់
Hi everyone, good afternoon. So we can start in a bit. We see that we currently have 38 participants now, and we're looking forward to other people joining in the next few minutes. We'd like to request everyone to kindly mute themselves. Okay, thank you. So just to start off, I'm Divine. I'm from GCAP. I'm in charge of communications for GCAP. We're a member of the People's Vaccine Alliance. Welcome to today's session on communications in Asia, entitled Translating Digital Advocacy and Mobilization into Real-Life Actions. So we're looking forward to everyone's participation this afternoon. I'll be moderating this session with Hi, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for your time and joining us today. We are so happy that we have a lot of participants for the webinar today. And yes, I'll be moderating this with Divine, and then looking forward for our fruitful discussion and also presentation as well.
All right, thanks. We'll just check out the chat box from time to time so everyone can just utilize it and let us know of your comments and if you have questions. Okay, so now we see that we have people joining from Bangladesh and Nepal, India. We really appreciate people who come from time zones who are way too early or way too late. So thanks very much for joining us. We'll be starting in a few minutes. So just to give everyone a run through of what we'll be having, we'll be listening to our representatives from PVA Asia, Oxfam, and Digital Agency to discuss topics on how digital platforms can be a driver in health communications and advocacy, specific digital campaigns that our speakers have handled and led, and how we can better engage with our audiences, specifically on making sure that we engage the correct community influencers so that we make sure that our campaigns really translate to real life action. Okay, so we can start in a bit. All right, so for our opening remarks, we'd like to call on Jared Enriquez. Jared is the Regional Communications Coordinator for People's Vaccine Alliance. He's been a development communications practitioner for a while. He's based in Manila. He's been with PVA Asia last year, and he's been very effective in leading this project. He was actually the one who also led this way back in December 2022. He led the survey which is the basis of this session, which is hopefully just one of the first. So I'll turn it over to you, Jared.
Thank you, Divine. Good afternoon from Manila, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank all of you, all of the participants, for joining us and giving us some of your precious time for this webinar. Our goal in the next 2 hours is for us to learn not just from the speakers, but also among each other. We know that for the past 3 years, we have been heavily relying on digital platforms for our campaigns and advocacy. And we also acknowledge that all organizations have their own strengths and areas of improvement when it comes to mobilizing and advocating online. So today we will discuss some campaign studies that can help us in our communication strategies to better engage with our audience, not just online, but at the end of the day, translate these engagements into real-life action. So I also remember the Nobel Peace Prize lecture of Maria Ressa in 2021 when she said, "What happens on social media doesn't stay on social media." So today, that's what we hope to do, that whatever we do online, we hope that it will contribute not just for the betterment of our organizations, but also the place we live in by ensuring vaccine equality, robust pandemic prevention, preparedness and response, and of course, better health systems for all. Thank you at maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Jared, for the opening, and also thank you, Divine, as well. And moving on to our next agenda on the global perspective on health and communication, on how digital platform can be a driver in health and communications and advocacy, by Christy Clemence, the communication and digital lead from People Vaccine Alliance. So Christy Clemence leads the Alliance Digital Communication, working on PVA Global's content, comms, and creative campaign. She works with regional colleagues and Alliance member to highlight member work and bring the Alliance together around the shared communication aim. Thanks for joining us, Christy, and moving on to you.
Thank you very much, and yes, thank you for having me here. It's an honor to be here. I'm just going to look to share my screen now, and I'll just check that it is working. Right, can everyone see, or can I get a thumbs up from someone just so you can see my screen?
Yeah, we can see I can see your screen, Christy. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so as said, what I'm going to be talking about is digital platforms, advocacy and mobilization from the sort of global perspective of PVA Global and also the health sector in general. And so I'm primarily going to talk about 3 different areas of digital platforms, so social media, website, and touching on digital adverts as well and how those can be utilized. So starting off with social media, in terms of advocacy, I think as we all would say, social media is an incredibly powerful tool. It's particularly relevant, I think, in terms of the global health sector because of how many of the people, so whether that's government ministers or people involved in the NGO sector or just the global health world in general, so many people are online and on these platforms and also just responsive to the power of these platforms. So when thinking about how to utilize social media for advocacy, one of our sort of initial things that we always do is say, okay, where are our audience? Who do we want to speak to? Who do we want to be influencing at this moment? And where are they? And so Twitter has often been the answer to some of those questions. And that's one reason why at PVA Global, we focus quite heavily on Twitter. That's not to say it's the only one. When looking at advocacy as well for social media, one of the things that we always look to and we always recommend is seeing, okay, of the different tools that exist on these different platforms, how can we utilize those to our advantage? So for example, as people have used to great effect, and PVA Asia, I think, is particularly good at this, utilizing hashtags for Twitter storms and things like that, just really garnering the fact that there are so many members, so many activists, and really focusing that attention on one particular area. But there's also, lists can be incredibly useful as a way to organize a great number of people to rally around things. And obviously this kind of cuts across all different social media, but video is an incredibly powerful tool. And as we all saw from the video at the beginning of this call, it can be just an incredibly powerful way to share messages and share people's stories. So for that reason, I just will mention TikTok as a great video platform. It's a great way for organizations ourselves to get our messages through, but it's also a great way to engage different potential supporters and get user-generated content, which I think is a really wonderful way to get people involved, but again, just to bring momentum to your campaigns. And one of the great advantages of TikTok, I would say, over potentially some other social media platforms is the fact that it's so shareable. Video performs well across all different platforms, and TikTok makes it very easy to share those videos. So with regards to examples of advocacy from PVA Global, I wanted to highlight a recent work that we did around the, what was at that point, the 3rd year of anniversary, if you were to call it that, of COVID-19 having been declared a pandemic, where we got 200 leaders to come together over a global letter. And as you can see from the photos and names here, some very influential people. Being able to utilize what was an offline action, getting those people together, bring them together, sharing that story with the media, we're also able to use to great effect on social media as well. Please, could you mute?
Nggak mungkin kita bicara.
Thanks. And yes, so I just put at the bottom left, just from one tweet with this image where we were able to, tag those people involved, and also, at the people that we really wanted to direct this message to, that we wanted to advocate to. We're able to get a great number of engagements on that. In terms of mobilization, absolutely one of the things we think is such a great thing about social media is that it takes different events that you can hold in real life and all across the world and really bring those together. So I've included an example here from GCAP, different events that they held, and many different partners from around the world engaged in different offline actions, which then you can utilize social media to really show the strength of those mobilizations, show just how broad and diverse our movement is in terms of what we're calling for and in terms of who we're aiming to influence. And so, as I have written in here, one thing that I would really recommend in general is just being really opportunistic. So every single action that you're doing, online or offline, thinking about how this could be social media content. And I think that's a great principle to take forward for activism in general, but I think it particularly is relevant in terms of real life mobilizations that you do. And then just as a small extra thing on social media, I wanted to say that for mobilizing, social media can be great for education as well as engagement with your potential audience and supporter base. So as I've kind of referenced before, videos are great for that. So I had an example here of a video that PVA did quite early in its existence, where we basically were trying to explain what had happened in terms of vaccine inequity, in terms of the sort of stranglehold, as you can see depicted here, that the big pharmaceutical companies had over the world, and really trying to use video and animation in this case to get our message across. And another thing that is sort of referenced in here by the fact that this video is being shared by Mark Ruffalo, the American actor, who also narrated the video for us, is that another great thing about social media is that you can bring big influential names, get them involved by providing what is, from their point of view, a relatively small action. You're just asking them to copy and paste some text or to retweet something. So it's a low barrier of entry ask, but it can have a huge impact in terms of the number of people that they are able to influence. And as you can see in this case, he was particularly advocating towards Joe Biden and other G7 leaders. So, a really impactful audience and a really impactful messenger for that to come from as well. So I'm just going to move on. Thank you. To how to utilize websites. So again, that's something that at PVA, we try to have the website as a really useful tool, hopefully for the whole alliance, for supporters, but also for members, to be able to use to help harness your advocacy and your mobilizations. So in terms of advocacy, we try to keep the website as a very important log of different actions and different events. So we'll try and get photos and any stats that we can have from different mobilizations, try and have those on the website just to show what we've done and the power and breadth of the alliance. Having a well-maintained and logical website is a great place to be able to direct media, which is obviously very important in being able to get your message out there, but also to be able to direct potential supporters towards. You can have call to actions on there, but also it's just a place for people to really learn about you, what you've been doing, and how they can get involved as well. We also hope in general that it can be a place of learning for the wider movement. Again, learning from what different members have done, and there are more things that I would recommend bringing in that we haven't been able to yet because of capacity. but we would like to bring in more things like, different blogs and stories from across the Alliance movement. And obviously it's a great place to host things. So the little screenshot that I've included here is some of the reports that we have on our website. And again, we want those to be really useful resources for Alliance members, potential supporters, and media to really understand who we are, what we stand for, and what we're working towards. And this is just a small caveat, but obviously very important to us as a global alliance. It's very useful that when you have something on websites, because so many different web platforms will provide automatic translation, that it just makes things quite accessible, which is incredibly useful, especially if you don't have big budgets to translate sort of each document yourself. In terms of the website for mobilization and engagement, again, it's a central law from which allies can rally around. You can have visual representations of events and really bring things together. So these different actions from all across the world, you can bring them together and give people, centralized calls to action. It's also useful for data collection if that's part of your digital strategy, taking emails, and then so you can have a supporter journey from their website is an excellent place to start. And it's as with, I sort of mentioned with social media, especially if you're a small team, small budget, you really just want to make sure that any content that you get can be used in as many different contexts as possible, and having it on a centralized website is a really good place to start. And then you can, share that out across the wider alliance to use. And, we've had some of these images here from different actions around the world. We've had different partners message and say, oh, can we ask if, Action Aid if they're happy for us to feature this image from their activism in one of our annual reports about work of the Alliance, that kind of thing. And so finally, I'm just going to move on to digital adverts. And so we think that digital adverts can be, incredibly useful for both advocacy and mobilization, and sort of as a part of that also feeds into education, as we sort of referenced with the videos that we put on social media. So I kind of look at the digital adverts in two areas. Traditional adverts, maybe social media adverts, are used for audience building, which are, often quite expensive, but they can be incredibly effective. And if it's an important thing to be able to, reach more people and also show the sort of power and depth of your movement, they can be incredibly useful. But also the reason I particularly put them in here is that we've been experimenting more recently, using digital adverts for advocacy itself. So, for example, we have we did geolocated adverts with an example like the one that you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen, that we put specifically to go on websites for people who are in the area of Moderna and Pfizer's headquarters. So yes, we did that in the lead up to their shareholder meetings, which we knew during which they were going to announce, huge profits. In some cases, like huge pay rises for CEOs, like a lot of the sort of behavior that we know we often scrutinize and that we know contradicts their claims about, how they're not profiteering from a pandemic, and actually they're acting very, in a very positive way. So the reason for doing that is we don't have the kind of huge budgets where we can blast these adverts all across, the whole world, or even if we were to pick a particular country, they'll cost a lot of money. But what we could do is be quite clever with them and aim to make, Moderna and Pfizer feel as though the whole world was seeing these kind of adverts which called out their greed. And really sort of try and scrutinize them at a time when they would be particularly conscious of scrutiny. Now, like a lot of our advocacy, we can't then say, oh, they saw these adverts and then they completely changed their business practices, but it's the kind of thing that we know can have a slight impact. And in a similar way, we can use that geolocated advocacy for things like when there was the World Trade Organization meetings in a particular area of Geneva. we shared a campaign. There was a digital mobilization from around the world of people sharing their eyes and saying, you know, we have our eyes on you, WTO, and we geolocated that around the area that we knew that these important decision makers would be meeting. So we call this sort of, or rather it is called sort of paper tiger advocacy. So making ourselves seem a lot bigger and a lot more impactful than we are because we're working with limited budget. And so I'm just going to quickly wrap up with like very short top tips that we would recommend for digital advocacy and mobilization. So the first is having a very simple social media kit, and I've included a link in the slides. I presume they'll be shared afterwards. I've included a link to one of our recent social media toolkits, so we can to give you an idea. But basically, especially as you know, we're an alliance of lots of different members, very busy, and we all have our different priorities. So what we try and do, and what PVA Asia have always done really well, is just provide a simple kit to say, you know, top line messaging, you know, use this photo, this graphic that we've put together, or this video, and here's our suggested text to go with it. And this is when we recommend that you post it for, you know, maximum impact. So also, as I've kind of said throughout this, we just recommend incorporating social media into everything you do, and for every opportunity, think, you know, could this be a social media moment, and how can I make that happen? Also recommend harder than it sounds, or certainly that's how it feels to me. But you know, so many people are so online, and there's so many things that happen across the internet very quickly. It's always great when we can bring in what we're doing to be relevant to those moments. So to be very reactive, and if possible, to be funny as well. Though, as I say, it sometimes feels a bit hard. We don't have comedians on staff. Another just general piece of advice that I would say is, whenever possible, we just try and prepare everything we can in advance of an event. Often we're so caught up with planning the actual event itself that when it comes to you know, posting while we're there, we think, oh wait, I don't know the handle of the person who's speaking, or you know, I should have thought about in advance what hashtags I used, etc. Definitely recommend having an excellent central log, ideally a website that you can refer to. And yeah, just be scrappy and be savvy about like using the tools that you have at your disposal as much as possible. And yeah, obviously I'm going to say this as an alliance work, but it's definitely true as well. But it's, you know, about how do you engage and work with all of the people in your network to infuse them around you know, your topics and support them on theirs as well. So thank you very much. I think I more or less kept to time, but thank you for indulging me if I went a little bit over.
Thanks, Christy. No problem. You made good time. Thanks so much for everything you talked about. Just to synthesize a bit, and everyone in the audience, feel free to let us know if there's anything we missed or you want to go back to. So Christy talked about digital. Hold on, sorry. So Christy was able to share to us about having the importance of having a central log, especially since we know that in advocacy work, we tend to work in very small teams. So it's important to be scrappy about the tools that we already have and to try to prepare in advance. I'm particularly impressed by the paper tiger approach. That's something we're really familiar with also. For example, in the Philippines, it's what we call discarte. It's being scrappy and just trying to be smart about resources that you have, even if they're limited. So is there, maybe I'll also ask if there's anything she wants to add from what Christy talked about.
Thanks, but I think there is nothing from me at the moment. But as Devi also said, if any of us feeling like you want Christy to go back to any particular slide or any specific topic that you would like to have even the discussion or the questions, please feel free to let us know. Maybe you can think about it for a few seconds before we going into the questions Q&A session. Thanks, Yuan.
Okay, thanks. We actually have one question already in the chat box, and we see someone raising his hand. It's Pradeep. We can read the question in the chat box right after Pradeep. Pradeep, go ahead.
Oh, hi, Christy. Thanks. It's been nice presentation, useful also for us who are not very conversant with all the communication techniques that you use. Sorry, my child is crying a little bit on the background. Kindly manage. Christy, initially you told you that's something I could never ask PVA colleagues. How could you reach out to all these 100 top leaders to get the signature? Was it through emails, or we used our own channels to get into influentials, or we tagged them, seeking them to support through Twitter or any other media? That's something which we try to do, but we a little bit of guidance will be helpful. Christy, there, yeah.
Yes, no problem. And so firstly, with regards to reaching out to lots of influentials, I have to give credit to other members of my team, because it's not me who leads on that itself. So partly colleagues that I work with in the team, but also across the wider alliance. And I think, again, that's one of the huge strengths that we have as an alliance. We have at PVA Global, there's an influentials group that meets on Wednesdays. Everyone is welcome to join those groups if they would like. And basically, that group itself, along with some PVA Global staff members, and often PVA Asia, PVA Africa, and LAC, they'll come together around a moment and say, okay, we think this is a particularly important time to share this message, this kind of message, and who would be good messengers for that. And then when they decide who those should be, so recently, for example, it was scientists, that group sort of brainstorms together, okay, who are the people that we already have some connection to? Either we already have their email address, or in some cases, and again, this makes us very lucky as an alliance, but some of our members already have connections with those people. So those are always the first people that we'll reach out to, because it's like everything, it's always so much easier when you have a direct connection and you have goodwill with people. So I would say, certainly for any PVA members, I would really recommend joining the influentials group, so that you can tap into that network, and also start to build those connections of your own. We do also do some like cold calling, emailing out to people with whom we don't have direct connections, and so yes, I would say that those are harder to do, but absolutely still worth trying, and you never know who will want to connect with you. And I'll just mention, because I can see that Laura Flores is here in the chat, and she's one of the excellent colleagues that I was referring to, who she co-chairs the influentials group, and she's put her email address in the chat. So I definitely, as I say, I do recommend reaching out to her and looking to join the group. It's just an hour of your time, and you're not obliged to say anything or do anything, so you can just go and observe and sort of get to know the group and see if you think it would be useful for you.
Great. Thanks, Christy, and thanks, Laura, as well. We'll be resending Laura's email just in case anyone will miss it from the chat box. So I hope Pradeep's question was answered well. I'll just read a question from the chat box from Suvik. I hope I said your name correctly. Please feel free to also raise your hand if you want to read it your question yourself. But he asked midway through your presentation, sometimes from organizations, some serious or very crucial message needs to be shared with the masses. But due to the long readings, there are very few engagements in those social media posts. Those can't be turned into micro elements in forms of reels, memes, and normal posts as well. What do you recommend to be done in those scenarios?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And so some of the reports, for example, that I showed briefly in my presentation, we've had that exact same sort of question ourselves, to say this is all really important information, and in some cases, yeah, you can turn them into short explainer videos or reels. but as you say, it's not always possible. I don't have like a one size fits all answer, but what I can draw on from our experience that I think I could say has worked quite well is, especially if it's say a report or something big coming out, we have tried to arrange sort of media briefings, which you could do, so just digital, webinars that you invite the media to, but you could do the same thing with potential supporters as well. So everyone's coming into this environment knowing this is going to be a longer form thing where something is explained and really deep dived into it, and then you're going to reach a smaller number of people than just with like a social media post, but obviously with a topic like you're talking about, you need like a deeper understanding for people. So that would be my recommendation, to try and have more of a proactive and longer engagement with people, because even though you won't reach as many people, the ones that you do will really get to understand what you're doing and the importance of it.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Christy. I hope that answered your question, Suvik. We're just trying to make our time, so we have time for one more question from Joanna. Hi, Joanna. You can unmute and maybe you can ask your question. I'm also really interested in the answer to this question.
Thank you, Divine. Hi, I'm Joanna from WNDA. I have this question about paper tiger approach. If you could just elaborate, because usually like we are a campaign organization and we don't have enough resources for advertising our content. So that would be great if you could expand on that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's the principle from our point of view of the paper tiger approach is definitely to just try and sort of in anything that we do, just try and make it seem like we are much bigger and better resourced and sort of bigger staff than we actually are, not for the purpose of bragging rights, but because the people that we want to influence, so the decision makers, obviously respond to what they feel is much more sort of the more eyes on them, the more pressure they'll feel to act. And then similarly, in terms of pharmaceutical companies, the more people they think are seeing and being outraged by their practices, the more that hopefully they will try and temper that down. So a few ways that we've done it have certainly been, those digital adverts. Again, I mean, they're not cheap. I think the ones that we did around Moderna and Pfizer were about $3,000, but they do reach a great number of people in that specific area. And because it's so targeted to the people that you really want to influence, we see it on the few occasions that we do it as like a good use of our money. And yes, it's as we say, it sort of feeds into that idea that what we hope comes out of it is that the pharmaceutical companies don't think, oh, they've just paid to sort of target this tiny little area around our building, that they think, oh no, how many people are seeing this? Like, is this going to millions of people around the world? So we do that, and then similarly, even just as Pradeep was talking about, like the influentials work that we do, if you can have the voice and the backing of someone with a huge amount of clout and credibility, especially in the field that we're talking about, then I think that associates us with an esteem and an environment that is much bigger and much more established and well respected than just we on our own merit would be. So I definitely, as I say, like recommend seeing what ways that you could look to do that in your work, whether it's with the influentials group or with the outreach to celebrities. So just a little brief thing on that, because I know we're short on time, but with celebrities, we also occasionally have contacts via members, but there is also a lot more sort of reaching out to celebrities via DMs, but more so via emails. Just knowing we'll reach out to maybe 50 people and 2 people might get back to us. So it's not going to be a huge return on investment in terms of numbers, but the people who are interested in what you have to say and who do engage with it, because they will have outsized influence in terms of number of people who adore them and number of people who engage with them. It is often we see like a worthwhile investment, and again makes us seem bigger and more stronger than we are just as a sort of tiny individual team.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks, Christy. Unfortunately, we have to move on to the next speaker, but everyone, please feel free again to just share your questions and any clarifications you might have in the chat box. Thanks so much, Christy. That was really enlightening. We're looking forward to even more campaigns of PVA, and thanks for all your work. To move on to the next part, we'll be introducing our next two speakers. They'll be sharing one topic. They're both from Oxfam. So just to talk a bit about their background, so we have Himanshi and Sara. Himanshi Matta is from, hold on, loading. Himanshi Matta is from the Asia Communication and Media Lead for Oxfam International. She has 13 years of combined experience on media relations, communications, advocacy, and she's also a journalist. She specializes in helping nonprofits brand their work and telling their stories, particularly through the press, on social media, and through digital campaigns. She also worked with organizations such as International Planned Parenthood Federation, Amnesty International, and Oxfam India. She spent a lot of time working with Indian print and television networks, so she knows very well how the news industry works, what makes a good story, and how to strengthen engagement with journalists. Besides all of that good work, she's also a mother of a 1-year-old boy, and she's always looking for insights on how to handle the wild toddler years. With her will be Sara Khan. She's the social media and design lead at Oxfam in Asia. She has 9 years of experience in the private and development sectors in many areas such as campaigning, advocacy, content production, design, video, photography, and advertising. She was also involved in Oxfam in Pakistan, Saatchi and Adcom. So we are looking forward to their talks about regional campaign case studies and creating, localizing, and improving digital campaigns and advocacy. So hi, Himanshi and Sara.
Thank you so much, Divine. Yes, I can do a quick screen share. And you guys can let me know if you can see my presentation the minute I.
Yep, we can see it.
Yeah. Okay, is it full screen for everyone? Just wondering. Good, I see a nod, I think, from Christy. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi and good evening and good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to be taking you through, Sara and I will be taking you through two campaigns. One is obviously which has massive visibility globally, and one which we are trying to build at an Asia level as well. We work on economic inequality. Some of you would know Oxfam's work and would have seen our work. And we made a very clear institutional choice to address the question of inequality. And inequality, as you know, is subdivided into economic, social, and political. While we try to address the multiple dimensions of inequality, we capture two very critical moments for campaigning, and one of that is the World Economic Forum at Davos, and the second one is the United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP. Sara will speak to you about the COP moment, and I'll speak more about the Davos World Economic Forum moment and our campaign around that. So this year, 2023 is the campaign that we launched, which was called Survival of the Richest. And every year, this is a prolonged campaign. Every year, we draw attention to the starkly growing trends of wealth concentration that we see in our world, where the rich and the other percentage is really divided. Why do we need to do it now? I think that's evident from the growing numbers of disparity. And yes, Divine.
Sorry, Himanshi. We can see if you can just adjust your screen to make it full screen on. Just show the slide because we can see your speaker notes.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh,
I think
super.
it should be.
That's what I was trying to avoid, but then it seems it happens. Okay.
Maybe you can click
Toggle
display
camera,
settings.
toggle
Yeah.
subtitles. I'm not too sure how to do it. If anybody has any advice around that, that would be great.
All right. Hold on. Let me just.
Can you check the display settings on top?
Mhm.
What?
Yeah, maybe you can click display settings, just so people can see better.
Top
everything.
left, there's an option.
Yeah.
Display settings.
Oh, I can't. Why can't I see those? Sorry, guys. Just give me a minute. So where you guys are pointing me, unfortunately, is where the screen share toggle bar is also there. So I'm not able to go onto it. Show taskbar. Wait, let me just.
Himanshi, I can share your presentation so that you can,
Sure.
yeah, you can
Sure,
keep
sure,
your
sure. I'll
laptop.
stop this. I'll stop the
Yeah.
share.
Sure, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Just let me know if I need to
There,
proceed to the
that-
next slide.
Yeah, there. You can see the slide
Oh, superb.
bigger now. Yeah. Thanks,
Yeah.
Himanshi. Sorry you had to
No
cut
worries.
you.
No worries.
Thank you.
Yes. So I was just saying why now. So this is an important aspect for our work, and I think over the years we've seen that the stark inequality, especially in income levels, is increasing, and the general argument that is provided is it's a normal outcome of the capitalist world that we are living in, the current economic model that we are living in, and Oxfam believes that that is not the correct way of approaching things. It's not the common sense way of it. And our campaign targets three stakeholders. One is the governments of different parts of the world. Then there are businesses, especially those who gather around during the World Economic Forum, the big billionaires, the citizens who are active participants in demanding a just world. And we do it, as I said, during the World Economic Forum. We can go to the next slide, please. Right. Now, this is a very big trend in India, so I thought I'll perhaps put it here. It says how it began. So we began in 2013 with a very small briefing paper, and that was one of the first research paper that we brought in during the World Economic Forum. And how it's going is evident. We've managed to get approximately 3,000 plus media hits. Just when you Google it, this is not the number of media hits is pretty high, but I think whenever Davos or whenever World Economic Forum is mentioned, Oxfam's name is something that you can really hear about. You can hear about the reports as well. So the stark so the visibility part of it is too much for us, and that's amazing. If you can go to the next slide, please. Right. So about the campaign, what we built during this time is that we worked on the success of a previous year's campaign, and actually not just previous year, but the long duration of campaigns that we have to build up all of those successes, and played an emphasis on what's really going on in the current scenario with COVID, with everybody coming together once with the new COVID world, with the new COVID realities, and passing all of those across, and the fact that we've lost too many people in the last few years, while there are just the number of billionaires' wealth has really doubled up. So we spoke about the stats, we spoke about who's losing, who's winning in today's economy, and we illustrated how the ongoing crisis again of COVID has impacted the lives of ordinary people. It has brought about an economic recession, it's brought about inflation, and the multiple crises that we see across the world, about where we are in wars with different countries, and across the region. How has that impacted us at the moment? Then the other bit that we focused on is the current cost of living, inflation, as I said, that's pushing people deeper into poverty. And I think this was also the first time, as we've mentioned, that we spoke about how much tax should we levy on the wealthy people. So from the campaign point of view, we had very, very clear asks we had very clear demands from the people, and also we had a very clear system of how do we build up the story for the people and for the ordinary citizens. Next, please. Right. So I mean, the elements, it's important to mention here that this is not a campaign that is designed by a sole team within the Confederation, within Oxfam. And there are a lot of resources that are put in to just capitalize on this one World Economic Forum moment in Davos. And we do put a lot of energy in it. Every year we try to increase the scope. Like last year, we had 60 countries who participated in this massive event for us. And there were a remarkable number of countries from the Asia region who participated more, and I'll speak about that later. But from the groundwork, where on the summit, we try to be seen as much, we try to participate in offline events, which are organized by different corresponding agencies, and then for ensuring that we have massive research, credible research, and to amplify the work in the media, and looking at public mobilization through means of donor communication or fundraising opportunities or any kind of visibility that we can provide during this moment. So it's a lot of work that we do behind the scenes. Next slide, please. Right. The approach that we take for our content is using killer stats to attract the audience, then exemplifying with human stories. So simply put, like few of the taglines that I've put here, which worked really well for us in the market were every billionaire is a policy failure. Now these are very hard hitting statements to make, but we also had the numbers to back it. We also had the numbers of how two billionaire brothers were owing more wealth than half the Irish population. That number is hard hitting. It's factual. It's correct, and therefore, it gives us the space to talk about the billionaire dream that we don't want to live. And this is the killer stats is what brings virality to our campaigns, is what we have witnessed. We did begin with a lot of human voices initially, but we realized that I think the appetite in the market for, okay, tell us in numbers, how much is the billionaire wealth? Oh, tell us in numbers, how much tax am I paying? Was higher. And not many a times you see people wanting to know numbers, but in this case, in the inequality campaigns that we've seen the numbers work very well. But we don't want to lose our brand existence and brand philosophy of having hope, of having the humans behind the stories. And therefore, we always try to bring that element out together. And therefore, we bring the human stories that you look on the right, where we are talking about Rosa, who's a mother of two in Spain. We are talking about Yusuf, who's a taxi driver, and Ghosia, and Shahana, who's a housewife in India. And they are talking about the price of a gas cylinder going up. And when you put this across on socials, and then you talk about a billionaire getting so much of wealth, and you just look at the other number, which is being floated of less than $1 being searched by a family, then it brings out many emotions in people. So it's a good mix that we bring to the table and we deliberately try to get more of that, where we try to show the starkness in what we are saying and the craziness of this world at the moment. Yeah, next slide, please. So this is a list of products that we design. It's a 4 to 6 month period for us to be able to plan for the World Economic Forum. And even before the real planning begins, of 4 to 6 months, we start speaking with each other as to what do we need to do different in our markets, and what is it that we can do best to promote. And in the lead up to the World Economic Forum, what are the other key moments that we can lap on to talk about the previous year's reports and the previous year's numbers, and how do we use those numbers. This year, we did an explainer film, which went really well, which talked again about how the inequality is rising. I think that the basic explainer film always works well in a complicated subject, because there are new audiences that are coming to this question or are coming to the taglines, etc. So you need to have something as a backup to introduce them to the idea and the complexity of the thought that most of us as NGOs have, similar to saying like why sexual rights or why economic justice, or these are very complex topics. So having these explainer films work. Twitter Spaces is something that we organized, may not reap us great results. We might not have many audiences, but again, it's about grabbing an opportunity to just be present, and when there is an important moment, you want to be there and bringing your perspective, which could be an Asian perspective, which could be a global perspective, but getting that out is important. The more you are seen in campaigns, the more you kind of spread out and put your energy in, is what we've seen that brings us the brand visibility or the campaign visibility and the impact visibility we want. Then animated stat graphics is something that is amazing for the young viewers, especially on spaces like TikTok, especially on spaces like Instagram. They work very well. The Facebook audience, I mean, Sarah will say more on that, but largely I think the Facebook audience in a market like India for sure is older now. So we have more senior citizens using Facebook and a younger audience using TikTok and other platforms. So they have much more appetite to read posts, while the younger audience is really interested in a 10-second stat graphic. Podcast is something that we host regularly. We've done a podcast on inequality for years now, for 4 years, I think. So that's again a space that we own. We've decided to build a narrative and not to wait for somebody to in the media space to hear our comments. So we are out there, and again, the next point that I speak about is controversial. It could be that you would want to do this or not, but getting your spokesperson to do a tweet thread, or getting a representative of your organization to use their personal social media, is a great way to engage, and it has worked wonders for us. We've got 50,000 views when one of our spokesperson just did a tweet thread informing about what is in this report and the breakdown of that report. Opinion pieces is what we all do, I think, in the social sector. Spoof videos is something that you see on your left, which talks about hard work does not pay off. So it's like a breaking news format that we did. It was tongue in cheek. It was out there telling people that, you can work for 20 hours a day, but that's not going to make you a billionaire. What will make you billionaire is a corrupt political system, or is an economy which is not designed for you. So building the perception of people on the larger narrative is also important, going beyond just the numbers that we have at the moment present for the campaign. Then opinion of people on the street about how much do you think a billionaire is making every day. Again, this is a very fun thing to do, more engaging than talking about the hard numbers in the report, or talking about the serious business of how the politicians are not working towards their economy. It's easy to work around these things. Beyond this, stakeholder engagement. So we do a lot of joint press releases. We do a lot of reach out to our allies, writing emails much in advance and letting them know the report is coming. There's an embargo copy available. We would love for them to amplify. We would love for us to tag them on the post and see if they can amplify at their end. And then there is bursts of organic celebration that one can do, like we did. Like, we didn't know that we were trending in the EU, so the EU market decided to do a trending post of, hey, it's all down to our latest report, and we're glad to see that we're trending. So stuff like that. We also hired a a cartoonist in India to do a comic take on our report on the number. So designing comics is again a great work. And blogs are underrated, but we have our own space for blogs on the websites. And even though at the moment when you post the blog, we do not get immense visibility, but we've seen that people do tend to go back to them. And when you link it to monetizing through SEOs, etc., that also works really well. Next slide, please. mindful of time. Perfect. So localization of content. Wow, this is one of the favorite things to showcase, because I think it is something which is amazing to see happen within the Confederation at the moment, and we are happy to say that we're able to design. The first thing that we localize content is with the numbers. So the inequality numbers that we see at the global level, we have a separate sheet for every country, and at times we do an analysis of these numbers for every country. At times the country teams take the onus of doing the analysis, and at times at a regional level we do the analysis of these numbers. And that offers the teams an opportunity to use the numbers if they like in their markets in a different way or not. Sometimes it's very sensitive to speak about the country context, and it's easier to speak about the regional context. So rather speak about how the region is building more billionaires than to speak about the countries, because the government is insensitive, or the government is well, this webinar is being recorded, so not being insensitive, but perhaps more restrictive in its settings, and would not appreciate the tone that the organization is taking. So everybody has the space to decide what can be done. So our attempt is to offer a package of products within the organization and allow them sufficient time to brew, think over it, get back to us and let us know that how would they like to localize the content. Would they like to go with the country numbers? Would they like to go with specific case studies from just their countries? Would they like to go with getting an illustrator from their own country to design a comic? As I said, Sanitary Panels India is a very good example of how they tapped onto it. Would they like to change the hashtag into a more appealing hashtag for their market? So all kinds of work is really open, and people are happy to do it at a country level, but a pre-planned package of what is coming and how we can support, and what is the English material available, Arabic material available, Spanish material available, really helps them plan things better. We can go to the next slide, please. Right. As far as the impact goes, I mean, this our coverage for this event last year has been over 17,000 media hits. And if you take the average advertising value for that, you would see it's worth $1 billion. And that's all free that Oxfam has got. And that's one of the reasons why we feel like this is a brilliant moment for us to campaign on inequality. And the fact that we were quoted by The Guardian. I mean, The Guardian quoted us and called us that our report happens to be the only useful report that is presented during the World Economic Forum, and everybody looks forward to it, is something that we're really proud of at the end of the day, that as a campaign, it has stood strong despite launching it in 2013, and despite kind of trying to say the same thing over and over again, we've not lost the audience, we've actually gained more people. So in terms of the messaging, it's one of the marketing tricks, just keep repeating the same message until it registers, and we are kind of following that rhythm. But we do have a different ask every year. We do demand something differently. Maybe it is tax the rich, but how is perhaps how we build on to the research and the evidence for it. Next slide. On digital, social media impressions, and again, this is only for the international handle that you see. Sarah handles the Asia handle, and the numbers there are added, and there are more. And across the Confederation, you would see more numbers, but we've got with the international handle itself, we got 702 million impressions, and quite a lot of mentions, and very important people, celebrities and others retweeting, political influential personalities having retweeting, resharing it for the virality of it. But I think I must explain that this was also the first time that we introduced a Google search. And for the first 16 days, we ensured that there was more traffic coming onto our web page and website. And we were able to plan we planned things around our top keywords, like top richest men in the world, wealthiest people in the world, causes of poverty. These are all the searches that people do. So causes of billionaires, and all of this was tapped onto our repository, and we made sure that when people are typing this in Google, they are able to first land to our website or our web page. Then we did a lot of Facebook advertisements and advertisements across platforms, but I think Facebook did flag a lot of our ads in Philippines, in Latin America, and Central America. That's because Facebook has a very weird policy of what's political, what's controversial, etc. Despite that, I think our click rate was really high, and we did feel that our audiences were mature enough to be asked to go to, say, listen to our podcast or read our newspaper, or sorry, read a newsletter letter, or probably donate to us. So that was again a great thing. The content that got most clicks was either directly related to the idea of what's the cost of living in today's world. That was the content that kind of worked for us in terms of messaging. The enormity of, like, the expense of living in this world was what worked for us. Explainer videos, as I said, they did best on Twitter, and they did best on Instagram, etc. LinkedIn, we used it. It did not bring a lot of traffic and engagement in terms of numbers, but I think it's still a work in progress for us. It's a good awareness channel. We did see that some of the important influential people in different organizations, top organizations of the world, were able to reshare or liked our post. But yeah, we did not get too much of engagement on it. Yeah, so that was it from my side, and I think now I'll hand over to Sara.
Yes, we can go to the next slide. Thank you, Himanshi. So the second case study we're going to be talking about today will be coming under the pillar of climate justice. Oxfam has been long working with others to raise awareness of the human impact of climate change and how climate change, inequality, and poverty are interlinked, and they reinforce each other. What is this campaign about? It highlights the severe climate impacts faced by the impoverished communities in Asia and expose the broken promises of developed countries by emphasizing the critical gap between vulnerable countries' needs and available climate finance. As we all know, our region has a lot of countries which are most affected by climate change, and they are increasingly vulnerable to the climate crisis. And the at most risk communities require financial support to adapt. So why now? If not now, it will be too late to deal with the consequences. Delaying action would have severe consequences, potentially rendering it too late to address the pressing issues at hand. It is crucial to prioritize countries in Asia that are burdened with debt by providing them with substantial grants rather than loans. The financing that we need in Asia, mostly we get in the time of loans, and it is really crippling our communities and further indebting them. They spend most of their finances paying back their debt than actually working on transforming the landscape, the climate landscape of their countries. So by grant-based financing, we can enable these countries to engage in long-term impactful work. Our campaign targets are the West, who are the highest emitter of carbon dioxide in the world. So most of our messaging has to go towards the richer countries of the world, which are the global north or the rich governments. Coming under those are also climate networks, businesses, and citizens who are important stakeholders who can come together to see transformations happening in the fight towards climate justice. And we plan this around, again, we ensure that when we have these campaigns, we designing these campaigns, we try to plan them around key global moments so that we can, there's uptake of our key asks, our recommendations in global markets apart from our national markets. So we designed this around the United Nations Climate Conference, COP27 in Egypt last year. Next slide, please. So what is COP? It is a global conference where world leaders, civil society, companies, and activists gather to discuss the response to the climate crisis. And our vision for COP is real time-bound commitments to implement climate justice. We have been engaging since a long time, focusing more on the human impact of the climate crisis. Oxfam's reports and communications around climate and inequality have been consumed by media houses and also influenced debates during COP26, in which a small group of rich people and governments are disproportionately responsible for the climate emergency we are in, while at the same time, it's the communities who have done the least to cause it are impacted the most. Asian countries have outlined their support needs, and fulfilling them is crucial to achieving climate justice for those least responsible for the crisis. We aim to demand accountability from the richest nations and who are also the major emitters, urging concrete actions to fulfill climate pledges and increase support for vulnerable developing countries. And the support we need are grants in Asia so that we can empower Asian countries to effectively combat climate challenges and foster sustainable development. You can move to the next one. So this is showcasing over the years the diversity of content with which we try to feed our important information, hard-hitting facts, or explainer videos. So people have varied preferences when it comes to consuming content. Some prefer written articles, others go with videos, infographics, podcasts. So by offering diverse content types, we are catering to our audience's preferences and ensuring that they can engage with the content that they prefer. So the content which I would like to point out here, which has been doing really great as of late, are animations. Animations and art is basically a very good format to help audience digest hard-hitting realities and facts about the world we live in. It's really easy for people to consume and not feel like they're being called out on or the onus is lying on them, and it helps them to take the message forward as being part of the solution than being part of the problem. So like it really helps in getting people in reaching out to people. So we would really recommend animations as a format going forward and sharing hard-hitting information with. You can move on to the next page. Voices of the people are really, really important to communicate in our campaigns. We amplify these voices of the most affected by climate change, and we try to broadcast this on regional and national media channels. First-hand accounts and real-life experiences lend credibility and authenticity to the campaign, as always. Like as Machi was mentioning earlier, like with the killer facts, the human stories are very important, that the people are at the center of everything we do, even in our communications. Hearing directly from community members who have been impacted by the issue adds a sense of trust and legitimacy to the campaign's message. In a visual like this, we do recommend, though, that I was also reading a question earlier in the chat, that we do recommend going for shorter quotes, a location, and a hashtag, which will be sufficient. We do not need to add more of it because we have 3 seconds to grasp the attention of our audience to really pull them in before we lose them. So it is recommended to put as short a quote, a key ask, or to word it in as few put as few words in your phrases and your statements as you can. And we also ensure when we're trying to procure content from our communities, we guide the photographer, we inform them on how to take the pictures. We obviously ensure consent, and we always ensure that our communities are shown in a dignified manner in spite of the poverty and the inequality they live in. We never try to show them which pulls away from their strength and their ability to lead change. Next slide. Thank you. Again, putting a face to the struggle, to the fight is very, very important. Human interest stories come across from all over our confederation, and they help us show how all of us are connected in our struggle in different ways too. Like if you see from New Zealand, Pakistan, they're all different parts of the world affected by floods. In the Philippines, there are youth leaders coming up who are trying to serve as advocates for the community. So to the local governments so that they can be involved in decision making. In Ethiopia, suffering from drought. So like when we present a larger scale across our confederation, we realize climate change affects all of us. So by sharing personal narratives and experience, human interest stories can humanize complex issues and make them relatable and compelling to our audiences. Next slide, please. So we will now come back to some key campaign activities in Asia, which we led last year in the lead up to COP27 to set the pace. To change the slide, thank you. This report formed the basis of our campaigning for last year for COP. So we oftentimes time the release of our reports in line with on-ground advocacy opportunities, such as at events such as COP27 or ADB meetings, which we are annually a part of, where there will be an attendance of relevant stakeholders. Research from reports provide a solid basis for informed decision-making and can influence the priorities and actions of relevant individuals or institutions. On November 4th, Oxfam Asia published a comprehensive report on climate finance needs in the region, focusing on identifying gaps in the available support for adaptation. It precedes the event of COP27 and aligns with Oxfam's COP27 event strategy. Can you move to the next? This is something we designed to complement the campaign for COP27. We organized an online regional youth dialogue on the same date as November 1st, but we launched the report with this event. The dialogue brought together a panel of young climate justice activists from Bangladesh, China, Nepal, Pakistan, and the Philippines, all who run their own NGOs or startups and are helping in the fight against climate change locally. Participants discussed the climate crisis in Asia, the urgent need for increased grant-based finance for adaptation, and shared their national and local experience in climate advocacy work. Next slide. The dialogue generated a profound discussion on climate inequality, and from the viewpoint of youth activists, the intergenerational injustice was spoken about a lot too. Panelists had the opportunity to exchange experiences in mobilizing youth and marginalized communities demanding climate justice and equitable climate finance, and which was also one of our goals. It also helped shape discussions regarding necessary policy responses leading up to the UNFCCC COP27 and beyond. Next slide, please. Yes. We kept the visual identity of our regional youth dialogue in mind, and also knowing that we were appealing to a younger market of youth activists along with institutions, we aligned our visual direction that way. So we often design campaigns around hard-hitting figures from the reports, which is what we did here, because it provides factual support to the narrative or story that the campaign aims to convey. So we have our own social media handles as well, and our country offices also have their own social media handles. So the numbers of the reach you can see only indicates our channels, but they're much higher than that. We had Oxfam in Indonesia and Oxfam in Philippines also broadcasting promoting these messages on their own socials, since we took out only Asian region statistics relevant to the country programs which we work with to generate their engagement and interest in the campaign as well. So over here from the metrics, you can see so reach is calculated on Facebook and Instagram. So these are the number of people we reached on Facebook and Instagram. And impressions, the number of people who saw our content. This is from LinkedIn and Twitter. So this is the these are the numbers we garnered of these platforms. And the engagement is across all 4 platforms of Oxfam in Asia. You can move to the next. Core graphics are very important at the platform level because we offer representation to different countries. We ensure core graphics because it offers our stakeholders visibility beyond their national markets, and they're seen as key players in the Asia civic space. It motivates people to participate in most events that we do, and we try to create that bit of excitement in the Confederation to participate as well. For other campaigns, we also like to come up with core graphics because we try to, core graphics are in a way themes of participants. So we try to hold them. So for attendance from bigger organizations where they have influencing power, we try to hold them account to what their claims have been at the event. So core graphics is a good way to keep a record of all of that on a digital presence as well. Next slide, please. We are very fond of op-ed pieces and blogs. We often supplement all of our campaigns with these. We usually have someone from climate and gender coming together, and they work together to produce this because, as we all know, gender justice is cross-cutting across all pillars. So we produced an op-ed which was published on a number of media outlets across Asia. China Daily is one of them, which is mentioned here. And a blog may not get major hits in the first few months, but they are revisited quite often. They are referred to as factual sources of information. And it's also important to create an appetite internally for the campaigns that we do within our confederation as well, to create that interest so that virality, that opportunity for virality can come up when they are sharing it amongst their spaces as well. So ending up, I just want to say this is an ongoing campaign. Since last year, we have been continuing to engage institutions with influencing power such as ADB. We recently had events. We had a campaign for recommendations for climate financing. And what I'd like to add here is that we need to be consistent with the conversations we're having online. Just because we hit these global key moments, it is important to have that consistent messaging and social media planning for throughout the year so that we can keep bringing our audiences back to the subject of the campaign. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Himanshi and Sarah, for a very useful presentation. And thank you for sharing with us the different ways and technique for the campaign making and how the research and human stories, statistic or number help strengthening the campaign message and to attract the audience. For the interest of the time, we would like to change the agenda a little bit and moving on to our next agenda on creating content to better engage with your audience, engaging community influencers to translate campaigns into actions by Von Yacob. So Von experience as a digital communication strategist, including trending online activations for presidential and vice presidential campaigns, organizing more than 50 local online communities, an online TikTok show that generate a combine of 2 million views, a trending podcast show in the Philippines, and SaaS startup growth brand project with over 100 applications, over 30,000 app download for an e-commerce and fintech startup, and branding strategy for different local and international brands, company, and NGO. Over to you, Von.
I will just share my screen now. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we
And
hear
thanks again
you.
for having me. Yes, thanks again for having me this afternoon. Again, let me introduce myself. My name is Yacob, and I am from the Philippines. Currently, the director for digital strategy under Namayan Digital Incorporated. I also work as a communications manager with a former Philippine senator, and I also do some other stuff with the other companies abroad. But yeah, so I was asked here today to talk about engaging community influencers to translate campaigns into actions. But I guess I'll focus more on like one important facet of it, which is online community building, because a bit of my expertise are actually focused in online community building. And I'm very thankful that Himanshi, Sarah, and even Christy mentioned a lot of like practical stuff earlier. So we can go into like a more broader term this afternoon. But before that, let me share a story. I'm flashing a screen here of my face as an influencer. I'm just kidding. But yeah, so I'm flashing a screen here of my face. This was taken a decade ago. I'm sure it's a decade ago. So back in 2013, there was a big call to abolish the Sangguniang Kabataan in the Philippines. So for context, in the Philippines, we have barangays as our smallest political unit in the country. And each barangay has what we call a youth council. And this youth council is called Sangguniang Kabataan. These young leaders are actually elected every election cycle in the Philippines. And back in 2013, we got a huge call from legislators, politicians in the Philippines calling for the abolition of the Sangguniang Kabataan in the Philippines. And in 2014, we started organizing young people through Facebook. As a former SK official before, I was asked to be a convener of the Sangguniang Kabataan Reform Coalition in the Philippines. And with 5 other Sangguniang Kabataan officials in the Philippines, we started organizing online, particularly in a Facebook group that we created before, and started calling for the reform of the Sangguniang Kabataan in the Philippines. We presented a reform agenda for SK back then, primarily focusing on anti-political dynasty provision, financial autonomy, and the creation of the local youth development councils in the Philippines. And surprisingly, after years of lobbying for this reform agenda, we were able to pass the SK reform bill into law after 2 years, and we're able to secure the seat at the table of young leaders in the Philippines. I guess the point that I'm trying to make in this story is that there's really power in online community building, and we've seen it in the past. We've seen it like decades ago even, right? And on my personal experience, it worked for us because we started organizing, particularly on Facebook and even on Twitter, when we lobbied for the SK reform law in the Philippines. So now, to provide context to the conversation that we will be having this afternoon, let's go through some numbers now and the lay of the land, basically, or the digital landscape in the world. We are now looking at 4 billion people. 4 billion social media users around the world based from the recent statistics from Meltwater and VR Social. Imagine the number of people that we can target with the several campaigns that we can do moving forward. And with the 4 million social media users around the world, if we will deep dive into the motivations or the reasons why these people are using the different social media platforms that they have, it can all boil down to 3 things: connection, information, and entertainment. As you can see on the screen, a lot of people who are using social media would want to keep in touch with their family, friends, and even their loved ones. They use social media to fill spare time, read news stories, find content that are interesting for them, and see what's being talked about. So it all boils down to connection, information, and entertainment. And that's crucial because in devising campaigns and creating campaigns online, we have to think about the different motivations and reasons for the audiences that we will be targeting in different social media platforms. And actually, if we look at the different demographics of social media users, particularly on age, we would assume that each age demographic would have different motivation or reason in using different social media platforms. But actually, no, it revolves around those 3 things that I mentioned earlier: connection, information, and entertainment. So people use social media across all age demographics with 3 similar reasons: connection, information, and entertainment. And as we look at the trend of social media, especially with the different platforms being used now, if we will exclude WhatsApp, WeChat, and Facebook Messenger, those are messaging apps. The different social media platforms that we have now are primarily static and video format centric, particularly Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. We've now seen a shift of the different content formats and content type in these particular platforms, from Reels to TikTok videos to YouTube Shorts. So a lot of the content formats that we see now in these platforms have shifted to being more engaging and being more hyper-personalized and hyper-localized to these audiences. And another trend that we saw online is the rise of online communities. Like what I mentioned earlier, the approach now, and even I think all of the algorithms of all the social media platforms now will agree that the algorithm favors personal experiences or online or intimate experiences when using their different platforms. So more private niche groups and intimate online communities are now being favored by the different algorithms or of the different social media platforms that we have now. Because as we can see, we've shifted our behavior as well. We've shifted to crave for more human connection even on our online platforms. So even the brands, even the different multinational companies or global companies around the world have shifted to creating messaging that are more hyper-personal and hyper-localized so that they can connect more with their audiences online. And that's important because we can now say that online communities are now our community influencers. We've seen the rise of influencers back during the height of the pandemic, where a lot of local influencers have actually grown their different online channels, right? But now even influencers have shifted to creating online communities for their own platforms as another stream to generate engagement and reach for all of their content. So the goal now is not just to support and hone influencers that can help amplify the messaging for our brands, but also to build online communities for our campaigns, for our messages, and even for all the products or services that we put out online. And that's what we want to discuss this afternoon. Online communities are important because we can utilize these communities to amplify and distribute our content online. We can use online communities to collaborate and share knowledge and other information with like-minded individuals. And of course, we can use online communities to mobilize more people, either for a certain cause, to buy products, to help with brand awareness and everything else. So now we deep dive into community building. I will share another story for everyone in this call. So back in 2020, the COVID-19 was declared as a global pandemic on March 11, 2020. And on March 18, I started this initiative where we invited, me and my friends invited volunteers who can help translate the different materials from the Department of Health in the Philippines and our Research Institute for Tropical Medicine, or RITM. So we started looking for volunteers who will be willing to translate the different materials that they put out about COVID-19 and translate it to the different languages and dialects in the Philippines. Because as some of you may know, we have more than 100 of languages and dialects in the Philippines. So it's very important that we're able to communicate all the crucial information about COVID-19 to the different areas in the Philippines. And after 48 hours, we were able to grow our online community to 1,600 members. We were able to identify 23 language or dialect managers who can help facilitate the translation of the different materials that we have about COVID-19. And we started implementing a very gamified or interactive approach to activating our community members for them to translate the different materials on a daily basis. So some examples of the materials that we put out before are some advisories being sent out by the Department of Health, some infographics from the Research Institute for Tropical Medicine, or RITM. So all of the materials that they released from March up until late April, which were the crucial months for the COVID-19 information dissemination campaign, were translated to more than 25 languages and dialects in the Philippines, and were actually distributed and amplified through the different local government units in the Philippines as well. And all because it was an idea that we came up with after the COVID-19 was declared as a global pandemic in the Philippines. Right, so the key system that I think we should follow in building online communities is what you can see on your screen now. It's important for us to really identify the problem at the start, to devise a tool where we will be able to communicate or execute the solution that we want in order to address a problem. And last is to be able to monitor and analyze our impact in all of the campaigns that we're doing. To deep dive into this, when we talk about the problem, we really have to do a needs and audience assessment first before we come up with the solutions or the compelling narratives that we want to tell our audiences. And when we talk about tool, like what I mentioned, after analyzing the different needs of our audiences, or after assessing the needs and the different problems of our audiences, it's important for us to create a very compelling narrative where we can capture not just the logical side of the brains of our audiences, but also the emotional side of it, and create solutions that we're able to communicate in a very simplified manner. We need to find interactive channels where we can communicate these messages, and we need to set clear goals and objectives for our campaigns moving forward. And when we talk about impact, this is us monitoring and analyzing the different community engagement that we do throughout all of our campaigns. So this particular system, I think, is very straightforward and simple. And I think if all of our comms campaigns are kind of like anchored to the system that we have now, the community building efforts and all of the comms efforts that we're doing for all of our companies will be easy and will be helpful for the audiences that we're targeting for our campaigns. But above everything else, even having like a system in place, I think the crucial point that I want to share with everybody is community building is actually relationship building more than anything else. If we see our audience as eyeballs in our campaigns, then we might be losing the essence of doing communication campaigns. I think the most important thing about community building is actually building a relationship with our audiences and not just looking at them as eyeballs or as target markets or as audiences that you can target with your ads. I think we should really look at them as people. We should look at them as people with emotions, as people that can process things in their heads and in their hearts. So relationship building is something that we should be aiming for in doing our comms campaigns moving forward, more than anything else. So lastly, sorry if I'm being too fast. If you have questions, just let me know. But on this last part, I want to talk about the challenges and the tools that we can use moving forward in developing campaigns for the different communication campaigns that we have. So I guess some of the challenges, and also these are challenges that I've personally experienced in the past. Number one is really building trust. Like what I said earlier, we shouldn't see or we shouldn't look at our audiences as mere eyeballs or metrics online. We should look at our audiences as human beings where whom we need to build trust with. So getting things or saying things that they want to hear, saying things that validate their emotions and feeling is a crucial process in all of our communication campaign. The next one is maintaining engagement, and there are several tools now who can help us facilitate engagement within our communities. There are paid and free tools that we can use to help make sure that our community members are seen and validated. The next challenge is growth escalation. For many of us here who hasn't done like community organizing or online community building, growth escalation is one of the challenges that you can face. From growing your Facebook group, for example, from 100 to 1,000 will be a great challenge. It will include a lot of organic and paid efforts, most probably. But growth escalation is something that we should also focus on because we want our community to grow at the end of the day. And last but not the least is amplification and distribution of our materials, because again, one important aspect of all of the campaigns that we're doing online is amplification and distribution, making sure that a lot of people will be able to see what we've come up with. A lot of people will be able to interact or engage with the things that we do online. So some tools and recommendations for all of us here when we do our online community building efforts. Number one, I think, will come from a personal perspective. We really need to invest in building a team. I think a lot of us here, since we work in the NGO space, would think that, okay, one person can do all of these things at once. But truth be told, we need to invest in building a team who will just focus on community building and actually building a relationship with the audiences online, because I think a lot of people still don't understand that social media now has different facets, and social media now, since it has different facets, we should be able to invest in all of these important facets of social media. It's not just about content creation and posting and boosting content. Social media now is about building relationships, iterating, experimenting with a lot of things, being able to look at insights in a manner or with a particular cadence. So invest in building a team who can focus on this particular aspect of your communications team, because community building alone will need people to focus on it in order to build relationship with our audiences. The second one is to hone and support your advocates. So if you've already identified advocates within your community, you should be able to hone and support them by providing them easy access to the information that you put out, providing them tools that will help amplify the reach and engagement on their own particular platform. So honing and supporting your advocates will be very helpful in growing your online communities as well. And the last one on the manpower side is have an internal system in place, maybe through creating a system where you have a team who will focus on content creation, who will focus on inciting and looking at the data, and who will focus on activation, distribution of content, and amplification. So have an internal system in place and make sure that we'll be able to invest with the right tools and the right support for these people who are taking on these tasks and duties within your team. And on the right side, some recommendation, I guess coming from an experience, we really have to listen to data. So if you have someone within your team who can analyze your insights or your data from the different social media platforms that you have, I suggest that you listen to your data, and with item number 2, you experiment and iterate based on the data that you have. So if you think that this particular campaign doesn't work, then might as well iterate and tweak some of the variables or factors that you have within that campaign and continue experimenting, because I think what I've learned being in this space for more than a decade now is we really have to keep on experimenting and learning as well, because like what I said, if we see our audiences as human beings, the behavior will change as we move forward as well. And last, and this is like I think a minor recommendation for everybody, but I guess some people would take this as a huge recommendation as well. Don't be afraid of paid interventions. I think a lot of people here are kind of like, stuck with the idea that we have to grow all of the assets that we have, the campaigns that we're doing online has to always be organic. The thing is, if the platform or the algorithm of the different social media platforms that we have now favors those who can invest on their platform, then might as well experiment on having paid interventions on all of your campaigns moving forward. And I guess I'll end with a very recent experience that I've had. I think it was mentioned earlier that I was involved in several presidential, vice presidential, and senatorial campaigns in the Philippines. I was actually part of the team last year when we had the presidential campaign in the Philippines. I was part of the presidential candidacy of Vice President Lenny Robredo, and I was primarily in charge with the online communities for this campaign, where we are able to organize more than 80 online communities for her presidential campaign, and was able to activate these communities whenever we visit their areas, whenever we do our what we call campaign rallies in their areas. And we're able to launch several activations and online campaigns as well, where we activated these communities that we created or that we built over the past few months or years, if not. So yeah, from this experience alone, I think we really have to take into consideration that the things that we put out or the things that we integrate in our communications campaign should have to address the 3 motivations that our audiences have: connection, information, and entertainment. And as we move forward in building our own online communities and community influencers within your own organizations and companies, you should be able to remind yourselves of these 3 important motivations and reasons for using the different platforms that we have. And I guess that's for my time. Thank you so much. And I hope I was able to make sense with some of the stuff that I mentioned or I shared in this talk. Thank you for having me. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks a lot, Von. That was a super insightful talk. We'd also like to thank Himanshi and Sarah. We had a lot to learn. I guess just to try to synthesize it very quickly, from the past two talks, we know that the human element to everything that we do in communications is super important. They're not just audiences or just sources for data. Himanshi talked about how statistics should be grounded with human interest stories because that's how stories really resonate. And Von talked about how campaigns need to take into consideration the audience's motivations, if that's connection or information or education. That's really something that we have to remember in running your effective communications campaign. So what we'll do for the next 10 minutes is we'll just go through the questions you've already received from the chat box. We really want to entertain all the questions, so just feel free to shoot them in the chat box. We'll try to cover as much as we can. So for Himanshi, one of the questions from Samira, I think, applies to what she talked about when she mentioned that Facebook removes posts or ads for a certain time. What's your recommendation on what to do if there's anything that you did during that time, and what can you share to colleagues who experienced the same situation? Go for it, Himanshi. There. Sorry, can't hear you, Himanshi.
Sorry, my
There you
my
go.
headset
No
was there. Now you
problem.
can hear me. I was just saying the long and short, which I think this question is better suited for Sarah to answer, but I think we do change the content a bit, and I think Sarah can give more insights there about on a case-to-case basis what have we done. But as far as I am aware, that we have to tinker a little bit with the content to see if we can work around what is appropriate for Facebook. There is no guideline as such. So, in certain markets, a certain word would not work, and in other markets it could work. So we end up either selecting different markets or different countries to repost the ad, or really look at, okay, what is it that we can do? Can we shift another market? But yeah, I think Sarah, you could add a bit to it.
Yeah, we recently had this problem when we were doing a campaign for inclusive and responsible businesses. And what we realized is that we identified a few trigger words which are really deeply rooted in our messaging, and actually like something like inequality or corporations. So we realized like trigger words like these were what was flagging our content. So we optimized it, we edited it. We all not only had to change the content, the caption, we had to go back to the graphic and see what we could edit in a way. And then thankfully after constantly testing it out, then we came across, we then landed on the product which worked, and then that was getting promoted on our socials. So there's a lot of optimization. So if you're asking about the backend, what Facebook requires is that you need to register every country separately on which you're going to use your paid promotions on, which is very hard to do unless you're local from that country. So it's a bit of a loophole which we're still trying to figure out. So what we can do, we've also approached Facebook a number of times. They're not really great with responding back. So what we can do at our end is to optimize the content as we go, and sometimes we are learning things real time. And then trigger words which we have been flagging or identifying moving forward, then when we create the communications, we design the words, the sentence, the statements, then we ensure that we don't add those in our learnings.
All right, thanks for that, Sarah and Himanshi. I guess what we can take away from their answers is that you really have to be dynamic and flexible in running these campaigns, because sometimes we really encounter challenges like this. So it really pays to know our story and our message as well, so that we'll know how to adjust just in case we need to. So we have time for two more questions. This question is for Von. The question is from someone in the Philippines. He says that social media has changed from its inception to what it is today. We now see more fake content, troll accounts, and propagandized narratives online. What are the best practices you can advise us on how we can ensure a pleasant or a less toxic experience for the online communities we will create? Go ahead, Von.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question, and thank you that you came from the Philippines, because I work with two of the most trolled public servants in the Philippines. So I'm used to seeing fake news online, and I guess this is where community organizing comes in as a crucial component of communication in general. So like what I mentioned earlier, we really have to have a system in place, have an entire unit who will focus on doing research, content creation, amplification, and distribution of this content. Against all of these like misinformation and disinformation online. And one another learning that we had, these social media platforms that we have at present can actually be pressured into looking into their own community guidelines and looking at these materials being spread on their platforms. So being able to create that system, archiving and creating a database of these posts or content online that you see that are actually misleading or misinformation or disinformation, you can actually submit that to these social media platforms and pressure them to look into this as they are violating their own community guidelines. So there are several ways to fight it. But I guess the first step is to really have a system in place. Make sure that internally you are prepared when it comes to content creation, when it comes to distribution and amplification of your content. Because I think we really have to have this kind of machinery and system in place to be able to fight misinformation and disinformation online. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thanks, Von. We're just trying to chase the time. So for our last question, this goes for all three speakers, but we'll try to fit. We still have one part that we'll need to wrap up the entire event. So we'll just try to answer within 5 minutes. This question is from Mook from Apcaso. She says that she's a little curious about the differences between campaigns directed to decision makers or policy makers and people in the community. If you can take around 2 minutes to answer for all three of our speakers, that would be great. Thank you. Does anyone want to go ahead?
I can go first.
Sure.
So I think what is important is to first determine what you want to achieve with the campaign, whether it's raising awareness, promoting a specific cause, advocating for policy changes, or driving actions. But we need to first determine who are we doing this for. So even amongst decision makers, is it politicians, government officials, corporate executives, or community leaders? And among citizens, what we need to consider for campaigning for citizens, for the general public, is we consider their demographics, their interests and concerns. So for developing the persuasive messaging which resonates with each target audience, what we need to see is highlight the impact and benefits of the cause. For decision makers, emphasize the importance of their support and how it aligns with their interests or promises. And for citizens, focus on personal stories, relatable content, and how their engagement can make a huge difference. And now briefly summarizing the platforms which work really well. Okay, thank you. The platforms which work really well for decision makers from our experiences is LinkedIn and Twitter. And for the general public and amongst the youth, it's Instagram. And for even institutions, but mostly citizens, it's Facebook. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Sarah.
I can just add to it. I think briefly, I think Juan has done a lot of campaigning of both styles, is what I hear. But again, from my perspective, I can just say that when you're speaking to audiences which are community based, which are people centric, what is their power, how is it that they can be powerful, is very different than when you're going to a political system, when you're going to people who actually have a lot of power. And recognizing that your starting point or base point is different is important in crafting the message. I mean, I would not be able to say that a billionaire should take an action or donate, or someone who is in a power of influence should support Oxfam just like that. I would want to put the call to action in a better way and say that, Oxfam is working on this and we would like you to build a better world with us by committing to. So I think in the campaign tone itself, you make a call as to if it's a political person, if it's someone with power, what is it that you're asking them to do? All campaigns have a clear ask. That's how they become successful. For others, community-led, it's more about building allyship or building a desire to be part of something. So I think the emotional quotient of those campaigns are pretty much high, or it could be, so emotions could be anger or something that connects them together in a very different way. With political systems, I think with political campaigns where it's anything system driven, it's more at a larger level. And I think maybe one can add two more, because he comes from a very his journey is very interesting. I was just amazed to see that. So I think he will be able to say, and specifically any anecdotes, I would love to hear how has he handled with the political system. How do you convince people who have so much power?
Anji, for putting me to the spotlight. I was planning to be concise with my answer, but I'm now pressured to share stories now. But yeah, kidding aside, so I guess communicating to policymakers, we focus on three things. We focus on evidence, process, and impact. Those are the three things that they really have to know, because they have to make sure that it aligns with the environment that they operate in. So focusing on the evidences, meaning the data, the insights that they need to know, why they need to be able to implement a certain policy is important and crucial in any policymaker. The second is to kind of like share like a process or suggest a process that will make that policy possible. And the last is to focus on the impact on not just a very small society scale, but also on a very broader scale, the impact of these legislations on a very broader scale. And when we communicate to communities, I guess we just really have to focus on the benefits and the impact of these policies to them. So I guess if I will have to be concise with my answer, when we talk to policymakers, we focus on the evidence, process, and the impact. And when we talk to communities, we focus on the benefits and the benefits alone. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I agree with what everyone has said, so I won't repeat it, because I think you've done all a really good job of saying that. The only like additional thing I would say is one of the things that I think happens, particularly when you're aiming at the different audiences, is like, when you're focusing on decision makers, exactly what it is that you want to get across. And you can be quite like vigilant with that messaging. Versus with the community, one of the joys of it, I think, is that you really get to follow the energy of what people are bringing to that. So again, certainly, as I've said, like with a global campaign and also having quite a small staff, it's often the best thing you can do is put something out there to your community and see what it is that they connect with and take and run with it, and they'll change your campaign in a way that you maybe didn't foresee, but usually it'll end up being all the better for it. So yeah, with the two different audiences, I think that's like the big difference. But certainly I definitely recommend like encouraging that within your community. So yes, thank you.
Thank you for the answer to all of our speakers today. And for the interest of the time, I would like to moving on to our closing and remark. And I would like to invite Jeffrey Yacob, Senior Program Officer from APCASO, also the new PVA Asia Secretariat. Jeff Yacob is a Senior Program Officer at APCASO, working toward prioritizing issues around community engagement, gender and human rights in global fund grants in Asia Pacific. And as I mentioned, Jeff will be the next regional convener for People Vaccine Alliance Asia. Over to you, Jeff.
Thank you so much, and thanks again, and sorry, it's we were together with and Mook here in our office, and it's quite unfortunate that we don't have enough time to discuss this further, and we've been taking notes and also listening to the exchange. But I would like to end in a good note. So thank you, Jared, for organizing this webinar, and also for coordinating PVA Asia as part of the Secretariat. Your contributions to PVA Asia are sincerely recognized, and we are standing at the back of your accomplishments. Thank you also to our speakers, Christy, Himanshi, Sarah, Vaughn, for your insights and experience in today's learning webinar. So as the host of the next Secretariat, we from APCASO continues to commit to our 3 strategic priorities as PVA. Never again, fix the rules, and public health before profit. COVID-19 may categorically be over, but the impact of COVID and the havoc that it continues to create, especially to individuals and communities who until now have not received their vaccines due to structural and political constraints, make the dangers of this pandemic still apparent, and we cannot let this continue. So as a regional coalition, PVA Asia will specifically move forward and engage in two priorities. So that's the upcoming negotiations for the Pandemic Prevention, Preparedness, and Response, or PPPR, high-level meeting in New York, and also the G20 processes that are taking place in India. So these two spaces will ensure that our priorities as PVA Asia are reflected and prioritized. And I think one of the ways that this can happen is if we have a strong campaign strategy and approach. This webinar, as we have heard through the presentations, will provide us with an opportunity to strengthen our digital campaign front and also build our advocacy skills. And I hope that all of us have learned a lot from presentations, including myself, and have identified possibilities as to how these campaign strategies will further our advocacy priorities. We from PVA Asia Secretariat will be taking these back and also apply them in our campaign plans for the rest of the year. So once again, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jeff. And that will be the end of our webinar today. And I would like to invite everybody to, if that's okay with you, to turn on your camera, and then so we can have a group pictures together for the event.
Can you take the screenshot? Or I can do it on my end as well. Okay, everyone, please smile in 1, 2, 3. 1, 2.
Yeah, you don't worry if you don't have camera or it is inconvenience for you to turn on. That's very much okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, one more because I have two screens. 1, 2, 3. Thank you everyone for joining.
Thanks, everyone. Hope you had a good time.
Thank
Have a good day.
Bye.
Thank you.
Have a
Bye.
good day, everyone. Bye-bye.
All right.